I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
Following a drunk driving tragedy, a family reaches out.
There's no magic bullet. There's no one-shot deal. There has to be sort of a rising tide of awareness.
What can be done to help others?
Research shows over and over and over again that when people get involved with others who share their common problem, in this case, alcoholism or addiction, very powerful change starts to happen.
And cover up. Don't you know you're at the beach?
A schooler looked at me and said, "What are we supposed to wear?" And her friend looked at her and said, "You're supposed to dress like a grandma." And I was like, no, 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 you're not. And then I stood in front of them and said, "Do I look like a grandma?"
Good evening. The numbers are chilling. By one estimate, someone dies because of a drunk driver every 40 minutes. But for the Middle Village family you're about to meet, that is more than just a statistic. 16-year-old Robert Ogle was struck and killed by a drunk driver in the early morning hours of February 1st.
That's right, but while the Ogles mourn their son, they're also using the tragedy as an opportunity to raise awareness. It begins with remembering Robert, who he was and what he left behind.
He liked being around people. He wasn't a standoffish kid. If he were in a group of kids, whether they were his age or younger, you'd find him interacting. And
He was as good a kid as everybody said he was. He was really very personable. He was smart. He was interested in a lot of things. Good-natured boy. Tons of friends. You know, he just seemed to have a gift for that.
Robert Ogle was just a 16-year-old junior at Brooklyn Tech when he was walking with a friend in Queens this past February.
My son comes out the room and he's hysterical. 16-year-old kid, hysterical, crying, telling me, Mom, I can't be. And I'm like, but what's the matter? What's the matter? He's dead. I'm like, who's dead? So he tells me Robert was killed last night.
it was 6:30 in the morning, and the 3 detectives came to our house. And just like a military family, when you see, you know, the Marines outside your door, it's not a good thing. They simply asked if they had Robert's school ID card. All they were sort of commanded to do, as I can say, was to just verify that this is Robert Ogle, that he lives here. And they said he was hit by a car, and then I asked, is he okay? And all they did was say, he's passed, he's gone. And then they got out right away, and there we were.
To see my son going through so much pain, I'm sorry, kind of stabbed me in the heart, because I said to myself, my God, it could have been my kid. It could have been any of our children.
And it was this tragedy that motivated Wanda Nieves to educate teens in the borough of Queens about drunk driving and alcoholism.
So I made a decision. I called MAD, hoping that I'd get immediate support to see how maybe I can help get through this, help my son get through this, and the boys.
So Wanda teamed up with Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Resurrection Ascension Parish in Rego Park to hold an event in remembrance of Robert and to let teens know of the dangers of driving under the influence.
This is sort of a grassroots thing from this parish, you know. And it's because my son, because he had a lot of friends, and all his friends had mothers and fathers, that they're being drawn by this, you know, the shared loss, and maybe a desire to be proactive.
There's no magic bullet. There's no one-shot deal. There has to be sort of a rising tide of awareness. After all these years, I mean, when I was in high school, they talked about this, but it's a hard thing to get it to sink in.
Wanda says she's realized with a 16-year-old son of her own in the house that it's not an easy thing to get them to realize cars can be dangerous, especially during the first few months behind the wheel.
But they don't see it that way. They don't see it. They want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. So my objective is to raise positive peer pressure. Keep on drilling in to them, be safe. And of course, God forbid, do not drink and drive. Don't do drugs. You shouldn't do those things anyway.
People have to know that there are dangerous people out there at night. It's not just a matter of trying to prevent people from getting whacked out. You got to know they're out there, you know, and you know, be defensive. But when this thing it's just horrific.
We will have more on alcoholism coming up later in the show, looking at the causes and the help that's out there.
But stay tuned, we do have much more ahead when Currents returns, the day's headlines. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Let's turn now to today's headlines. The controversial Markey bill will not be voted on, at least not this year. The bill, sponsored by Queens Assemblywoman Margaret Markey, would roll back the statute of limitations on sexual abuse claims in New York for 1 year. Brooklyn Assemblyman Vito Lopez, who's sponsoring a competing bill, tells Newsday that the likelihood of either bill becoming law this year is highly unlikely. Catholic bishops in New York released a statement expressing gratitude to Lopez for his bill, which would not lift the statute of limitations. Meanwhile, one victims advocacy group says it is confident that Markey's bill could pass in a special session.
Catholic leaders have reached an agreement to allow unions to organize workers at Catholic hospitals across the country. Many hospitals have previously resisted union efforts, saying the tactics conflict with Catholic doctrine on social justice. The agreement recognizes the right of workers to decide whether to join a union.
An archbishop from the Netherlands is encouraging prayer for vocations, 140 characters or less. The Archbishop of Utrecht is using Twitter to encourage vocations to the priesthood. His diocese is in dire need of vocations. Projections show that in 5 years, his archdiocese will just have 50 active priests.
And back to New York now, as Archbishop Timothy Dolan prepares for a trip to the Vatican. The Archbishop will receive the pallium, that's a special vestment given to Roman Catholic archbishops. Before that trip, Dolan continues his busy schedule in New York. Last night, he made his first appearance at Fordham University during an event to promote Catholic relief services. He was introduced by Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Frank Caggiano.
That we have here a man who is a gentle pastor, a strong leader, a minister of compassion and healing, and someone who truly loves us. You know what? He didn't pay me to say that. Well, this was an event that was originally sponsored to bring elected officials and community leaders together to meet Archbishop Dolan in a very personal way. Archbishop Dolan is a man of tremendous passion, tremendous love of people, a joyful optimism, and I think that's exactly what the city needs at this moment.
This isn't a year for priests as much as a year of priests. It's more to kind of foster a renewal of priests and to let them know that the entire church is praying with them and for them. Our priests, they are some of the most humble, hardworking, generous, faithful men around. And I'm just so happy that what Pope Benedict XVI has said is, darn it, they need our prayers, they need our solidarity, they need our support. And this year is going to be a big step in that direction.
Well, I think it provides an exciting opportunity for really dynamic leadership in the church, to bring the church forward in many different ways, education, social services.
We're going to be able to work together on so many important issues facing the city.
I'm the one who's very grateful to you. What you're doing this evening, everybody, is continuing in a very beautifully effective way the welcome and the embrace that this community has given me since I was privileged to arrive on April 13th. I can't tell you how very much at home I feel.
Archbishop Dolan chairs Catholic Relief Services Board of Directors. Stay tuned, there's more Currents ahead.
After the tragic death of Robert Ogle, reaching out to help others.
Alcoholism, we know more and more now, is a disease that affects the whole family system, not just the alcoholic.
Earlier, we met the Ogle family, whose son was tragically struck and killed by a drunk driver earlier this year. They're now raising awareness about the dangers of driving while intoxicated.
And there are ways to avoid tragedies like the one the Ogles had to endure. One way to do that is reaching out to those with alcohol addiction. Last week, I sat down and spoke with a man who knows something about that. Well, to talk a bit about alcoholism and drunk driving, we are very happy to be joined now by Lucas Matheson, who's the Director of Field Operations for Catholic Charities Neighborhood Services. Mr. Matheson, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And we'd also like to welcome your guide dog as well, Mike. People might be saying, who is this canine friend that we have here? Right. But that's Mike, who comes from a long line of guide dogs, right?
Very distinguished line.
Very distinguished, very
right.
distinguished line. Yeah. Well, earlier on in our show, we heard the story of Robert Ogle, who was a local teen killed as he was walking with a friend, and a drunk driver went off the road and hit him. Yes. Well, now let's kind of talk about drunk driving and alcoholism. First of all, the alcoholism and the problem of that. What type of problem is alcoholism? Would it be classified as a disease? Would it be classified as some type of moral failing? What would you say to that?
Well, unfortunately, this is a very old and ongoing debate. I would say that the vast majority of people in our society still would consider it primarily a moral dilemma. However, alcoholism chemical dependency meets all the criteria for a disease. It was designated as a disease by both the American Medical and American Psychiatric Associations as far back as 1957. But because primarily of the stigma attached to the problem, the ongoing public perception is that this is somehow a character or a moral flaw in people.
Right. Yeah. What types of resources are available for folks who are going through this sort of chemical dependency?
Well, there are any number of resources. Catholic Charities has a wonderful program, the Flatbush Addiction Treatment Center, which is a very, very comprehensive program that addresses all forms of addiction in all of its stages. Catholic Charities is also the host of the Diocesan Substance Abuse Provider Network, which is accessible through ccbq.org, on which are listed over 30 providers in the Brooklyn and Queens areas that treat addiction and provide help and support for families. But I would, of course, champion our own program primarily because it does offer a very, very wide array of services and is also linked to many other charities programs, primarily in the area of mental health and housing. So it can really provide a very holistic approach to the problem and treatment of addiction.
Right. Now, when someone seeks out Catholic Charities or another organization, but specifically Catholic Charities, right, what could they expect to encounter as they enter into a program like that?
Well, a very full assessment is done, an assessment of every area of life. Also, of course, an assessment specifically in terms of chemical dependency or alcoholism, on the history of the progression of the problem, whether or not the person meets the criteria for admission, which would entail being diagnosed as either having an abuse or dependency problem. And then from there would go into treatment. Treatment would be characterized specifically for DWI by a combination of psychoeducation, a lot of education about what alcoholism is and what it is not, the symptoms, the signs, the progression, the consequences, especially as related to DWI, relapse prevention techniques. There would be a lot of peer support offered. Research shows over and over and over again that when people get involved with others who share their common problem, in this case alcoholism or addiction, very powerful change starts to happen almost very quickly. So it would be a whole range of psychodynamic treatments, but also peer supports, education, relapse prevention, motivational, interviewing kinds of things as well. So moving people toward change in general, yeah.
Well, you were talking about, telling them, educating them on the consequences of DWI and things like that. Mm-hmm. What about the family, friends of those who may have been the victim of someone who was driving under the influence? What sort of resources are available for them?
There are a lot of very good resources. Alcoholism, we know more and more now, is a disease that affects the whole family system, not just the alcoholic. And when something tragic, such as the death is related to a DWI happens, we offer comprehensive family treatment services, to not only just to victims of DWI, but to family members in general. Family members who have been involved and exposed to addiction, over a prolonged period of time have suffered a great deal. Obviously, the family in this young man's case has suffered tremendously. It's extremely important that they reach out, get some help, get some support. We offer it. Any number of treatment providers offer it. Also, I should mention that MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, SAD, Students Against Drunk Driving. The police offer any number of prevention programs and support programs. So there's an awful lot of help out there if people reach out.
Okay, great. Now, very quickly, just before we have to wrap up, are we getting a sense that these types of programs, whether they help those who are struggling with an addiction to alcohol, or if they are helping the friends and family of those who have been affected by that, do we get the feeling that these programs are actually working and achieving the intended goals for those that go through them?
Yes, we do. The prevention programs are especially powerful. The schools, the police departments are now offering prevention programs for kids as young as kindergarten age. And what we are finding more and more and more is that if children are exposed to an early age, to the realities of addiction, what it is and what it isn't, as I was saying before, and to various other prevention techniques, it can have substantial preventative effects later on down the line. Criminal charges, have their own deterrent factors, of course. Doing jail time, is not necessarily a deterrent, but it is certainly a wake-up call. However, the more we are able to look at and treat the problem of addiction as a disease instead of a criminal or moral problem, I think the better off we're going to be.
Well, very well, Mr. Lucas Matheson, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We'll appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing Mike as well. Now, for more information on the help that is out there, you can call Catholic Charities and their substance abuse hotline. That phone number is 1-800-659-1603.
Stay tuned. There's more currents just ahead.
A former Power Ranger morphs into a swimsuit designer.
Do I look like a grandma to you? And they're like, no, you look good, you look good. And
So, were you a fan of the Power Rangers when you were a kid?
Honestly, I'm a girl, right? So I wasn't into the robotic toys quite as much, but Barbie dolls, those kinds of things.
There was the pink Power Ranger.
Yeah, well, okay, I guess it was maybe after my time.
Well, yeah,
or if not before.
I think I was maybe slightly before the Power Rangers
I had
generation.
my nose
too.
in the books too much, okay, people? So give me a break.
And I was more of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle type, so they were still fighting crime.
Cabbage Patch dolls, yeah, never had one.
But okay, so here's the question though, and people might say, why in the world are you talking about Power Rangers? What does a Power Ranger do after they've hung up the helmet? Well, how about designing swimsuits?
All right, this is the point, right? The woman that you're about to meet is doing just that. She's a Hollywood actress and a devout Catholic who travels around the country preaching chastity. In the process, she's also encouraging women to cover up at the beach. And with summer upon us, despite all the rain, our Nathalia Ortiz has more about showing less.
Hi guys, we're with Hollywood actress Jessica Rey, who's designed, believe it or not, a brand new line of swimsuit, modest swimsuits, and they're very cute. Tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you. Well, one day I decided to never wear a bikini ever again because I was learning more about modesty and thought that they were immodest. Okay. So I went out shopping, and I think I literally shopped for 2 or 3 weeks straight and could not find what I was looking for. All the swimsuits that were considered modest were kind of they were like matronly or for older women.
So without any prior experience or background in fashion, this former Power Ranger took it upon herself to design her own modest swimsuit with a little more flair.
Well, a lot of people think that dressing modestly, that we cover ourselves because our bodies are bad or they're dirty, and we should then cover them. But in Love and Responsibility, Pope John Paul II, before he was the Pope, wrote that there's a difference between what you see in Playboy magazine and the art that you would see in the Sistine Chapel.
So it's all in the perception, then, I guess is what we're getting at. But many people perceive modest fashion as unfashionable. So what tips can Rey offer to women who want to wear cutting-edge styles but still cover up? You don't want to be stuck wearing something, like you said, matronly, something your grandmother might wear, your Aunt Bertha. We all have one of those, right? What do we do to avoid looking frumpy but also, you know, fit into this modest kind of look that we're talking about?
It's really hard. Actually, I was giving a talk to a group of girls yesterday, and I was talking a little bit about modesty, and this girl, high schooler, looked at me and said, "What are we supposed to wear?" And her friend looked at her and said, "You're supposed to dress like a grandma." And I was like, no, 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 you're not. And then I stood in front of them and said, "Do I look like a grandma to you?" And they're like, no, you look good, you look good. And so I will say that it is more difficult to look modest and stylish, and it does take a little bit more time when you're shopping, and we don't have very many good examples.
But one good example Jessica used as inspiration is Audrey Hepburn, a classic Hollywood icon who many believe personifies beauty and style in a modest way.
She's a fashion icon. Everybody knows who she is. She's beautiful, and she's not, you know, half naked and showing everything that she has. She was very stylish.
Jessica feels confident women can look pretty while wearing what the church considers proper attire. But what exactly is that? Who sets the rules here? Who sets the bar for, you know, how long my skirt's supposed to be? Like, is there a big manual like in the church I'm supposed to go ahead? How does it work?
I think it just depends. I mean, some girls have bigger breasts than others. Whereas, you know, the girl with bigger breasts may have to have a higher neckline.
Sure.
So it's difficult to say. Padre Pio, they say that on his confessional door had a sign that said, if your dress or skirt is not 8 inches below your knee, then go away and come back. So I was explaining this to this girl, and she looked at herself and said, "I don't have 8 inches below my knee," because she was really short.
Oh, wow, I'd be in trouble too, Padre Pio. And for those of you who'd rather stay out of trouble, Jessica Rey has the swimsuit for you.
And for more information, you can head to our website. That's netny.net/currents. Click on Riding the Wave, where Nathalia has posted more information about Jessica Rey and her line of swimwear. Cute as a button. The pieces are adorable.
That's great. It's very kind of 40s inspired.
When
you said Audrey Hepburn, that's actually kind of what I was thinking when I saw some of the pieces there.
Right. I was thinking a little South Pacific-y, you know, that kind of thing. Jane Mansfield era,
that kind of time period.
Yeah. But what's different, I think, about this is obviously that it's geared toward a youthful audience, you know, and I think that's nice. It's nice to have alternatives, nice to have diversity and variations. I don't expect to see you in any of them anytime soon.
No, I don't. You won't be heading to the beach seeing me in that.
Scary.
Oh, well, on that note, we'll end it. That's all for this edition of Currents. From Power Rangers to Paul, St. Paul, that is. The year for priests just began, but there is another year still underway, and in a few days, that year will be over. It's dedicated to St. Paul, and we'll talk to a Paulist priest about how they're wrapping it up. All that and more tomorrow right here on Currents.
And remember, you can always watch us online at netny.net. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Have a great night. Thanks.
Sorry.